Hi everyone, welcome back. This week we are finishing the book of Judges. Before we do that, I want to address or talk about two things to start. First of all, I will be jumping around a little bit and summarizing sections because, again, this is a violent time. There's a lot of violence in this time, and what we see over and over again is when you have a group of people that either are worshiping other gods or they turn their back on the God of Israel and they start committing atrocities, like true atrocities. God permits, even instructs the Israelites to answer egregious violence with just violence. And that's hard for us to think about, especially when we read the New Testament. Post Jesus, God is a God of love. He is a good father figure to all of us, to his children. But like we've said time and time again, he is a God of mercy, but he's a God of justice. So when terrible acts are committed, he permits just violence against the people that committed those acts. So that's what we see some of here. So I don't want to skip them and just pretend they don't happen, because this is what life was like before Jesus. It makes me more and more thankful that I live now in a world after Jesus, where it's a whole different set of standards. We're not living under the law. And we have, at least in this part of the world, we've had relative peace for in my case, I've never seen war up close. Not that wars haven't been going on, but it hasn't been here. So we haven't experienced this kind of violence and hatred. So again, I don't want to skip over it, but but I am going to summarize and move past it a bit, because it's I don't need to read the graphic nature of it. But so there's that. And also something I want you to take note of. There's a phrase that you'll hear several times over these chapters today, and it's, "At that time there was no king in Israel," because we're transitioning from the Judges to the Kings. The next book is the book of Ruth, and it's kind of in the middle. It's just a story about two women and a man. But anyways, and then after that we start the book of the Kings. So this is leading into the kings of Israel, that many of whom you've probably heard of: Solomon, David, etc. So today we're going to finish Judges. I will be jumping around a bit, but keep an eye out for that phrase, "That time there was no king in Israel. Each man did what he would, what he felt was right." And that's never a good thing. But okay. Book of Judges, chapter 17. There was a man in the mountain region of Ephraim whose name was Micah. He said to his mother, "The 1,100 shekels of silver over which you pronounced a curse in my hearing when they were taken from you are in my possession. It was I who took them, so now I will restore them to you." When he restored the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother, she took 200 of them and gave them to the silversmith, who made them a carved idol overlaid with silver. Then his mother said, "May the Lord bless my son. I have consecrated the silver to the Lord as my gift in favor of my son, by making a carved idol overlaid with silver." It remained in the house of Micah. Thus the layman Micah had a sanctuary. He also made an ephod and household idols, and consecrated one of his sons who became his priest. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what he thought was best. There was a young Levite who had resided within the tribe of Judah at Bethlehem of Judah. From that city he set out to find another place of residence. On his journey he came to the house of Micah in the mountain region of Ephraim. Micah said to him, "Where do you come from?" He answered him, "I am a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and am on my way to find some other place of residence." "Stay with me," Micah said to him. "Be father and priest to me, and I will give you 10 silver shekels a year, a set of garments, and your food." So the young Levite decided to stay with the man, to whom he became as one of his own sons. Micah consecrated the young Levite, who became his priest, remaining in his house. Therefore Micah said, "Now I know that the Lord will prosper me, since the Levite has become my priest." Chapter 18. At that time there was no king in Israel. Moreover, the tribe of Danites were in search of a district to dwell in, for up to that time they had received no heritage among the tribes of Israel. So the Danites sent from their clan a detail of 5 valiant men of Zorah and Eshtaol to reconnoiter the land and scout it. With their instructions to go and scout the land, they traveled as far as the house of Micah in the mountain region of Ephraim, where they passed the night. Near the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite and turned in that direction. "Who brought you here, and what are you doing here?" they asked him. "What is your interest here?" "This is how Micah treats me," he replied to them. "He pays me a salary, and I am his priest." They said to him, "Consult God, that we may know whether the undertaking we are engaged in will succeed." The priest said to them, "Go and prosper. The Lord is favorable to the undertaking you are engaged in." So the 5 men went on and came to Laish. They saw that the people dwelling there lived securely after the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and trusting, with no lack of any natural resources. They were distant from the Sidonians and had no contact with other people. When the 5 returned to their kinsmen in Zorah and Eshtal and were asked for a report, they replied, "Come, let us attack them, for we have seen the land, and it is very good." "Are you going to hesitate? Do not be slothful about beginning your expedition to possess the land. Those against whom you go are a trusting people, and the land is ample. God has indeed given it into your power, a place where no natural resource is lacking." So 600 men of the clan of the Danites, fully armed with weapons of war, set out from where they were in Zorah and Eshtal, and camped in Judah near Kirath Jearim. Hence to this day the place which lies west of Kirath Jearim is called Menahadan. From there they went on to the mountain region of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. The 5 men who had gone to reconnoiter the land of Laish said to their kinsmen, "Do you know that in these houses there are an ephod, a household idols, and a carved idol overlaid with silver? Now decide what you must do." So, turning in that direction, they went to the house of the young Levite at the home of Micah and greeted him. The 600 men, girt with weapons of war, who were Danites, stood by the entrance of the gate, and the priest stood there also. Meanwhile, the 5 men who had gone up to reconnoiter the land went up and entered the house of Micah. When they had gone in and taken the ephod, the household idols, and the carved idol overlaid with silver, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" They said to him, "Be still, put your hand over your mouth. Come with us and be our father and priest. Is it better for you to be priest for the family of one man, or be priest for a tribe and a clan of Israel?" The priest, agreeing, took the ephod, household idols, and carved idol and went off in the midst of the band. As they turned to depart, they placed their little ones, their livestock, and their goods at the head of the column. The Danites had already gone some distance when those in the houses near that of Micah took up arms and overtook them. They called to the Danites, who turned about and said to Micah, "What do you want, that you've taken up arms? You have taken my God, which I made, and have gone off with my priest as well." He answered, "What is left for me? How then can you ask me what I want?" The Danites said to him, "Let us hear no further sound from you, lest fierce men fall upon you and your family lose your lives." The Danites then went on their way, and Micah, seeing that they were stronger than he, returned home. Having taken what Micah had made and the priest he had, they attacked Laish, a quiet and trusting people. They put them to the sword and destroyed their city by fire. No one came to their aid, since the city was far from Sidon, and they had no contact with other people. The Danites then rebuilt the city, which was in the valley that belongs to Bath Rehob, and lived there. They named it Dan after their ancestor Dan, son of Israel. However, the name of the city was formerly Laish. The Danites set up the carved idol for themselves, and Jonathan, son of Gershom, son of Moses, and his descendants were priests for the tribe of the Danites until the time of the captivity of the land. They maintained the carved idol Micah had made as long as the house of God was in Shiloh. Chapter 19. At that time, when there was no king in Israel, there was a Levite residing in remote parts of the mountain region of Ephraim, who had taken for himself a concubine from Bethlehem to Judah. His concubine was unfaithful to him and left him for her father's house in Bethlehem of Judah, where she stayed for some 4 months. Her husband then set out with his servant and a pair of donkeys and went after her to forgive her and take her back. She brought him into her father's house, and on seeing him, the girl's father joyfully made him welcome. He was detained by the girl's father, and so he spent 3 days with his father-in-law of his, eating and drinking and passing the night there. On the 4th day they rose early in the morning, and he prepared to go. But the girl's father said to his son-in-law, "Fortify yourself with a little food. You can go later on." So they stayed, and the 2 men ate and drank together. Then the girl's father said to the husband, Why not decide to spend the night here and enjoy yourself?" The man still made a move to go, but when his father-in-law pressed him, he went back and spent the night there. On the 5th morning, he rose early to depart, but the girl's father said, "Fortify yourself and tarry until the afternoon." When he and his father-in-law had eaten, and the husband was ready to go with his concubine and servant, the girl's father said to him, "It is already growing dusk. Stay for the night. See, the day is coming to an end. Spend the night here and enjoy yourself. Early tomorrow you can start your journey home." The man, however, refused to stay another night, and he and his concubine set out with their pair of saddled donkeys and traveled till they came opposite Jebus, which is Jerusalem. Since they were near Jebus, with the day far gone, the servant said to his master, "Come, let us turn off to this city of the Jebusites and spend the night in it." But his master said to him, "We will not turn off to a city of foreigners who are not Israelites, but will go on to Gibeah." "Come," he said to his servant, "let us make for some other place, either Gibeah or Ramah, to spend the night." So they continued on their way till the sun set on them, when they were abreast of Gibeah of Benjamin. There they turned off to enter Gibeah for the night. The men waited in the public square of the city he had entered, but no one offered them the shelter of his home for the night. In the evening, however, an old man came from his work in the field. He was from the mountain region of Ephraim, though he lived among the Benjaminite townspeople of Gibeah. When he noticed the traveler in the public square of the city, the old man asked where he was going and whence he had came. He said to him, "We are traveling from Bethlehem of Judah, far up in the mountain region of Ephraim, where I belong. I have been to Bethlehem of Judah and am now going back home. But no one has offered us the shelter of his house. We have straw and fodder for our donkeys, and bread and wine for the women and myself and for our servant. There is nothing else we need." "You are welcome," the old man said to him, "but let me provide for all your needs, and do not spend the night in the public square." So he led them to his house and provided fodder for the donkeys. Then they washed their feet and ate and drank. While they were enjoying themselves, the men of the city who were corrupt, they were evil men, surrounded the house and beat on the door. They said to the old man whose house it was, "Bring out your guest, that we may abuse him." And then what happened was they said, "No, I won't give you the man, my guest," but they set out his concubine, who was kind of like his wife. They used the term husband as well to refer to him, him to her. They set her out instead, and she was abused and died from what the townspeople did to her. He found her in the morning, dead on the doorstep. Chapter 20. And then he sent word out to the Israelites that there's a problem here. Chapter 20. So all of the Israelites came out as one man from Dan to Beersheba, and from the land of Gilead to the community. The community was gathered to the Lord of Mizpah. The leaders of all the people and all the tribesmen of Israel, 400,000 foot soldiers who were swordsmen, presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God. Meanwhile, the Benjaminites heard that the Israelites had gone up to Mizpah. The Israelites asked to be told how the crime had taken place. So he explained what had happened, how his concubine, this woman, had died. Jumping to verse 7. "Now that you are all here, O Israelites, state what you propose to do." All the people rose as one man to say, "None of us is to leave for his tent or return to his home. Now as for Gibeah, this is what we will do. We will proceed against it by lot, taking from all the tribes of Israel 10 men for every 100, 100 for every 1,000, 1,000 for every 10,000, and procuring supplies for the soldiers who will go to deal fully and suitably with Gibeah of Benjamin for the crime it committed in Israel." When therefore all the men of Israel, without exception, were leagued together against the city, the tribes of Israel sent men throughout the tribe of Benjamin to say, "What is this evil which has occurred among you? Now give up these corrupt men of Gibeah, that we may put them to death and thus purge this evil from Israel." But the Benjaminites refused to accede to the demand of their brothers, the Israelites. Instead, the Benjaminites assembled from their other cities to Gibeah to do battle with the Israelites. The number of the Benjaminite swordsmen from other cities on that occasion was 26,000, in addition to the inhabitants of Gibeah. Included in this total were 700 picked men who were left-handed, every one of them able to sling a stone at a hair without missing. Meanwhile, the other Israelites, who, without Benjamin, mustered 400,000 swordsmen ready for battle, moved on to Bethel and consulted God. When the Israelites asked who should go first in the attack on the Benjaminites, the Lord said, "Judah shall go first." The next day, the Israelites advanced on Gibeah with their forces. On the day the Israelites drew up in battle array at Gibeah for the combat with Benjamin, the Benjaminites came out of the city and felled 22,000 men of Israel. Then the Israelites went up and wept before the Lord until evening. "Shall I again engage my brother Benjamin in battle?" they asked the Lord, and the Lord answered that they should. But though the Israelite soldiers took courage and again drew up for combat at the same place as the previous day, when they met the Benjaminites for the second time, once again the Benjaminites who came out of Gibeah against them felled 18,000 Israelites, all of them swordsmen. So the entire Israelite army went up to Bethel, where they wept and remained fasting before the Lord until evening of that day, besides offering holocausts and peace offerings before the Lord. When the Israelites consulted the Lord, for the ark of the covenant of God was there in those days, and Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, was ministering to him in those days, and asked, "Shall I go out again in battle with Benjamin my brother, or shall I desist?" The Lord said, "Attack, for tomorrow I will deliver him into your power." So Israel set men in ambush around Gibeah. The Israelites went up against the Benjaminites for the third time and formed their line of battle at Gibeah as on other occasions. The Benjaminites went out to meet them, and in the beginning they killed off about 30 of the Israelite soldiers in the open field, just as the other occasions. Therefore the Benjaminites thought, "We are defeating them as before," not realizing that disaster was about to overtake them. The Israelites, however, had planned the fight so as to draw them away from the city onto the highways. They were drawn away from the city onto the highways, of which the one led to Bethel and the other to Gibeon. And then all the men of Israel rose from their places. They reformed their ranks at Baal Tamar, and the Israelites in ambush rushed from their place west of Gibeah, 10,000 picked men from all Israel, and advanced against the city itself. In a fierce battle, the Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel. And on that day the Israelites killed 25,100 men of Benjamin, all of them swordsmen. To the Benjaminites it looked as though the enemy were defeated, for the men of Israel gave ground to Benjamin, trusting in the ambush they had set at Gibeah. But then the men in ambush made a sudden dash into Gibeah, overran it, and put the whole city to the sword. Now the other Israelites had agreed with the men in ambush on a smoke signal they were sent to send up from the city. And though the men of Benjamin had begun by killing off some 30 of the men of Israel, under the impression that they were defeating them as surely as the earlier fighting, the Israelites wheeled about to resist as the smoke of the signal column began to rise up from the city. It was when Benjamin looked back and saw the whole city in flames against the sky that the men of Israel wheeled about. Therefore the men of Benjamin were thrown into confusion, for they realized the disaster had overtaken them. They retreated before the men of Israel in the direction of the desert, with the fight being pressed against them. In their very midst, meanwhile, those who had been in the city were spreading destruction. The men of Benjamin had been surrounded and were now pursued to a point east of Gibeah, where 18,000 of them fell, warriors to a man. The rest turned and fled through the desert to the rock Rimmon. But on the highways, the Israelites picked off 5,000 men among them, and chasing them up to Gittim, killed another 2,000 of them there. Those of Benjamin who fell on that day were in all 25,000 swordsmen, warriors to a man. But 600 others who turned and fled through the desert reached the rock Rimmon, where they remained for 4 months. The men of Israel withdrew through the territory of the Benjaminites, putting to the sword the inhabitants of the cities, the livestock, and all they chanced upon. Moreover, they destroyed by fire all the cities they came upon. Chapter 21. Now the men of Israel had sworn at Mizpah that none of them would give his daughter in marriage to anyone from Benjamin. So the people went to Bethel and remained there before God until evening, raising their voices in bitter lament. They said, "Lord, God of Israel, why has it come to pass in Israel that today one tribe of Israel should be lacking?" Early the next day the people built an altar there and offered holocausts and peace offerings. Then the Israelites asked, Are there any among all the tribes of Israel who did not come up to the Lord for the assembly? For they had taken a solemn oath that anyone who did not go up to the Lord at Mizpah should be put to death without fail. The Israelites were disconsolate over their brother Benjamin and said, "Today one of the tribes of Israel has been cut off. What should we do about wives for the survivors, since we have sworn by the Lord not to give them any of our daughters in marriage?" And when they asked whether anyone among the tribes of Israel had not come up to the Lord at Mizpah, they found that none of the men of Jabesh Gilead had come to the encampment for the assembly. A roll call of the army established that none of the inhabitants of the city were present. The community, therefore, sent 12,000 warriors with orders to go to Jabesh Gilead and put those who lived there to the sword, including the women and children. Jumping to verse 14. When Benjamin returned at that time, they gave them as wives the women of Jabesh Gilead, whom they had spared, for these proved to be not enough for them. But these proved to be not enough for them. The people were still disconsolate over Benjamin, because the Lord had made a breach among the tribes of Israel. And the elders of the community said, "What shall we do for wives for the survivors? For every woman in Benjamin has been put to death." They said, "Those of Benjamin who survive must have heirs, else one of the Israelite tribes will be wiped out. Yet we cannot give them any of our daughters in marriage, because the Israelites have sworn, 'Cursed be he who gives a woman to Benjamin.'" Then they thought of the yearly feast of the Lord at Shiloh, north of Bethel, east of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem, and south of Lebanon. And they instructed the Benjaminites, "Go and lie in wait in the vineyards. When you see the girls of Shiloh come out to do their dancing, leave the vineyards, and each of you seize one of the girls of Shiloh for a wife, and go to the land of Benjamin. When their fathers or their brothers come to complain to us, we shall say to them, 'Release them to us as a kindness, since we did not take a woman apiece in the war.' Had you yourselves given them these wives, you would now be guilty." The Benjaminites did this. They carried off a wife for each of them from their raid on the dancers and went back to their own territory, where they rebuilt and occupied the cities. Also at that time the Israelites dispersed, each of them left for his own heritage in his own clan and tribe. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what he thought was best. And that is the end of the book of Judges. Again, it was a violent time. I'm grateful to live now, after Jesus. And just to, again, reinforce, there was no king in Israel. Each man did what he thought was best. That's a good reminder to us not to do that. It's very easy for us to justify in our own heads. We can even find individual verses in scripture that seem to mean one thing, and we can use it to twist, and we want to do something that we know is wrong, but we can find a verse that if we isolate it by itself, it sounds like it makes that thing okay, even though if you read the whole passage, it does not. There was no king in Israel at this time. We don't need a king over us, because our king is God, Jesus. We have that king who left us his word and his life, gave us his life. So we have instruction. We have a roadmap of what to do. We don't lean on our own understandings. We lean on God and Jesus and his word. That's our king. God is our king. Jesus is our king. But in this time, Jesus hadn't been born yet. They were still living under the Mosaic law, the Ten Commandments, and all those laws and rules. So Israel now moves into the time of the kings, who were imperfect men, but they were chosen and they did their best for a time to lead Israel as God prescribed. So we will read the book of Ruth, it's a short book, next week, and then we will get into the books of the Kings. So on that note, let us close, as we always do, with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Amen. So have a great week, and I will see you next Sunday. Bye-bye.